It started with the little things, the kind you almost feel guilty for noticing. Fewer kisses in the morning, shorter goodbyes at the door. That quiet space between us that used to be filled with stolen glances and soft laughter, now just silence. He'd look through me instead of at me, like I was slowly becoming invisible in our own home. I told myself it was just work stress. After all, he'd been pouring himself into that new project for months. When I finally asked him if everything was okay, he barely looked up from his phone. Just muttered something about deadlines, pressure, the usual excuses. I didn't want to push. I didn't want to be that wife, the nagging one, the paranoid one. So I smiled, touched his arm and said, "I know you're doing your best, my love. I'm proud of you." And I meant it. Every word, even if part of me was already starting to wonder if I was comforting a stranger. Looking back, I think I wanted to believe the stress story because the alternative was too painful to imagine. I clung to the version of him I married, the man who held my hand just because, who'd leave me little notes on the bathroom mirror. I didn't want to admit those days felt like someone else's life. I thought the distance between us was temporary. I thought love could bridge it. What I didn't see coming was that someone else had already crossed it. I remember one night in particular. I had made his favorite dinner, lit a candle even though it felt a little silly. I wanted to recreate something warm, familiar, but he barely touched his plate, said he wasn't hungry, that his head was still spinning from meetings. He thanked me, gave me a tired smile, and went straight to the bedroom to catch up on emails. I sat there alone at the table, staring at 2 untouched plates and wondering when I had become just background noise. But I kept telling myself relationships go through phases. People drift and come back again. Maybe this was just a low tide. I still wore his hoodie around the house when he wasn't home. I still folded his laundry the way he liked. I still left the porch light on, waiting for him, hoping he'd walk through the door and feel reminded of us, of everything we'd built. But with each passing day, it felt like he was walking further into a world that didn't have room for me anymore. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, trying to find peace in the sound, but even in sleep, he felt far away. There was a time when he used to pull me closer, even in the middle of the night. Now, there was a whole ocean between our bodies, and I didn't know how to swim across it without drowning in my own questions. I blamed everything but him, the economy, his demanding boss, the long commutes. I even blamed myself at one point. Maybe I wasn't exciting anymore. Maybe I had become too routine, too predictable. I started overcompensating, dressing up for no reason, texting him sweet messages during the day, suggesting spontaneous date nights he always seemed too tired for. And when he didn't respond the way I hoped, I told myself, he's just overwhelmed. He'll come back to me soon. One evening, I caught my reflection while brushing my teeth, eyes dull, smile forced, and I barely recognized myself. I used to feel secure, wanted, safe. Now I felt like a placeholder, a supporting role in the story of his life. And still, I held on. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You give grace, you stay loyal, you believe them when they say it's just a tough season. The night he left for that business dinner, I didn't hesitate. I straightened his collar, smoothed his tie, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Hope it all goes great. I love you. You're everything to me." And as he walked out the door without looking back, I believed the wedge between us was stress. I had no idea it was another woman. The night had that quiet stillness to it, the kind that makes you feel like something's about to shift, even if you can't quite explain why. Nathan came out of the bedroom dressed sharp, dark blazer, clean shave. He looked polished, like he was going somewhere that mattered, and I told myself, of course he looks good. It's an important dinner. But something about the way he avoided my eyes as he adjusted his cuffs made my stomach twist. I wrapped my arms around him, held on just a second longer than usual. "Hope it all goes great," I whispered. "I love you. You're everything to me." He gave me this faint smile, polite, almost rehearsed, and kissed my cheek. Not my lips, just my cheek. Then he walked out the door like he had a cab waiting. No, "I love you too." No last glance, just gone. And still. I stood there by the window watching the headlights disappear, thinking, he's just under pressure. He'll text me soon. Hours passed. I kept checking my phone, set it face up on the table during dinner, took it with me to the bathroom. Every buzz made my heart jump, until it didn't. Eventually, I curled up on the couch with a blanket and scrolled through old photos of us. Weddings. Vacations. Laughing at stupid things. I needed to remember those versions of us. The ones where he couldn't stop touching me. The ones where I knew, without question, that I was loved. Then it happened. That buzz on my phone that I'd been waiting for. My heart leapt before I even looked. I was already smiling, already imagining something sweet. Dinner went well, love. Can't wait to come home. But when I opened the message, the air left my lungs. It was a photo. Nathan. Sitting across from a woman I'd never seen in my life. They were holding hands. Her nails were red. His face was relaxed, even smiling. And the caption? He's with me now. Start packing. You're done. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at the screen, frozen in place. My mind went blank, then flooded all at once. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Had I been sleeping next to a liar for weeks? Months? My hands were trembling, but I still didn't move. I couldn't. It was like watching the moment your whole life unravels, and not being able to stop a single thread from snapping. I remember the silence in the room, not just around me, inside me. I had loved him with my whole being, believed in him, defended him. And he had left me, not with a conversation or even a lie to my face, but with a picture and a stranger's message. And the worst part? It wasn't just my heart that shattered in that moment. No, it was something deeper. Something darker, something that didn't break, it caught fire. I sat there for what felt like forever, the glow of that message burning into my eyes. I kept reading it, over and over again. Start packing. You're done. Like I was some disposable character in his story, like he could just rewrite our life without even giving me the decency of a goodbye. That's when the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. Just slow, steady rivers of disbelief rolling down my cheeks. I wasn't crying for him. I was crying for the woman who believed him. At some point, I wiped my face and stood up. Something in me had shifted. That fire I felt, it wasn't rage, not yet. It was clarity. The kind that only comes when a fantasy finally dies. I looked around the house we built together, the hallway we painted, the couch where we planned our future. And suddenly, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene, and I had no intention of staying where I'd been left to bleed. I didn't text him back, didn't beg for answers or closure. I poured myself a glass of water with hands that had stopped shaking, and in that moment, I knew. I was done playing the fool. He might have thought he ended something that night, but all he did was set something else in motion, something he'd never see coming. I didn't fall apart, at least, not in the way people expect. There were no dramatic breakdowns, no drunken voicemails, no impulsive confrontations. I didn't even tell anyone right away. What I did was think, quietly, carefully. Pain makes some people reckless, but not me. Pain made me sharp, precise. And if Nathan thought I'd just sit there and unravel while he played house with someone else, he clearly forgot who he married. I started by collecting. Not my feelings, not yet. Evidence, paper trails, login details, bank statements. Nathan always underestimated how much of our life I handled. I was the one who managed the bills, the taxes, the insurance. His name was on things, sure, but the weight? That was mine, and he'd handed it to me freely. Funny how power can look like responsibility until it's time to use it. I found the credit card statements first, hotel stays in cities he never mentioned, charges for dinners that didn't match his supposed calendar. I took screenshots, printed receipts. I even pulled up old emails he'd forwarded me with trip itineraries, matching them against dates he said he was working late. Piece by piece, I built the truth. Not for him, not even for her. For me. Because I needed to see it all. Laid out. Undeniable. Cold and clean like steel. Once I had the evidence, I moved to the logistics. I knew I couldn't just leave. Not yet. I wanted to make sure that when I walked away, I wasn't the one starting from scratch. Nathan had his fun. Now I was going to have control. Most of our accounts? In my name. The house? I paid the majority of the mortgage. My credit score? Impeccable. His? Less so. He had no idea that while he was out pretending to be someone's fantasy, I was holding the foundation of his real life in my hands. I called a divorce attorney, someone sharp, experienced, and highly recommended. I didn't cry during the consultation. I spoke clearly, calmly. I laid out the timeline, the documents, the photo. The attorney nodded, impressed by how organized I was. "You've done half my work already," she said. I didn't smile. I just told her, "I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in what's mine." And I meant it. This wasn't about rage. It was about reclaiming my place at the table, without him in the seat next to me. I also began making copies of everything that mattered: birth certificates, deeds, tax returns. I opened a new checking account, transferred my direct deposit, set up a new P.O. box. I wasn't running, I was rebuilding. But this time, brick by brick, with no illusions. Nathan had built a lie on top of everything we once had. I was just clearing the rubble so I could finally breathe. I never confronted him. Not once. I answered his occasional texts with vague kindness, nothing that hinted at what I knew. Let him think I was still playing the role. The sweet, clueless wife waiting at home. Every time he called me babe or sent a thumbs-up emoji, I saved the screenshot. Evidence. Proof of his lies. I didn't need to scream at him to be heard. I just needed to be patient. And patience, as it turns out, was something I had in spades. The strange part? I started sleeping better. The ache was still there, yes, but the clarity was soothing in its own way. I had a plan. I wasn't waiting for an apology or an explanation. I was waiting for the perfect time. For the moment he'd walk through the door and realize just how much he had handed me and how little he'd get back. He thought he was in control, but he was just a name on paperwork I was already rewriting. By the end of that week, I had everything I needed. My attorney was ready. My accounts were secured. My dignity was intact. And every step I took in silence made me feel stronger. Nathan didn't just hand me betrayal that night. He handed me the scissors. And when the time came, I'd cut him out. Cleanly, legally, without ever raising my voice. He walked in like it was any other day, keys jingling, shoes scraping lightly against the hallway tile. I heard him call out my name, casual, like he hadn't vanished into someone else's arms just days before. Maybe he expected a fight, a scene. Maybe he even rehearsed a speech in the car. But when he stepped into the living room and saw what was missing, the photos from the walls, the space where my desk used to be, the silence, I think it took him a second to register what had happened. There was a folder on the kitchen table. I'd placed it right in the center, perfectly aligned with the edge. Inside, divorce papers. Every section highlighted, every detail outlined. Next to it was a short note, handwritten, just 4 lines long. "Since you're so eager to start over, I made sure you could, with nothing I gave you." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. He knew my handwriting. He knew my precision. And in that moment, I think he realized he had underestimated the woman he betrayed. The bedroom closet was half empty. My jewelry box, gone. The bathroom counter, once filled with my skincare bottles and scented candles, bare. I had erased myself from the space with surgical care, not to be petty, not to be cruel, but because I wasn't leaving pieces of myself behind. He didn't get to keep remnants of who I was. I wanted the emptiness to speak louder than any goodbye ever could. I wish I could have seen his face. Not because I wanted to watch him suffer, but because I wanted to witness the exact second his fantasy cracked. The moment he realized that while he was chasing something new, I was preparing the endgame. I imagine he stood there, still holding his keys, reading that note once, then again, like maybe he misunderstood. But he didn't. It was all there in black and white, the boundaries I had drawn, the rights I had protected, and the life I was no longer offering him. He probably called me, maybe even more than once. I had already blocked his number. The woman he ran to? She was welcome to his explanations now. I was done playing interpreter for his mistakes. I wasn't interested in what he had to say, or in whatever version of the story he might have tried to spin. The man who walked out that door days ago wasn't the man I married, And the woman he left behind? She didn't exist anymore either. What he didn't understand, what men like him rarely do, is that silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. I hadn't slammed doors or thrown dishes, hadn't begged for answers or wept on the floor. I had simply moved with purpose. Every step, every detail, measured. That's what shook him. Not just that I left, but that I left without needing to explain why. He lost everything he didn't even realize I'd been holding. The house, on the market, joint accounts, separated, shared subscriptions, utilities, even the dog's vet records, transferred. I had thought of it all. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I wasn't leaving room for him to come crawling back or for me to second guess. I wasn't angry. I was finished. And there's a difference. Anger wants a reaction. Being finished? It only wants peace. I left behind a few things, not because I forgot them, but because they no longer mattered. A sweater he once complimented, a framed photo of our wedding, flipped face down in the drawer. And on the dresser, I placed one last envelope. Inside was a copy of my new address, not so he could visit, but so the final legal documents had a place to find me. There was no letter, no PS, no signature. Just a clean end to a story he didn't deserve to finish. As I closed the door to that chapter, I didn't feel empty. I felt still. Like everything was finally settling after a long, silent storm. I didn't wait for him to beg. Didn't wait to see regret in his eyes. He had given me silence for weeks. I just gave it back, in full. And as I walked away, there was no looking over my shoulder. Because when you've already grieved someone who's still alive, saying goodbye isn't hard. Starting over wasn't as dramatic as people make it sound. There were no grand declarations or sudden breakthroughs. It was small things at first, rearranging the furniture in my new apartment, buying fresh bed sheets in a color I never would have chosen before, learning the rhythm of living alone without feeling lonely. I wasn't trying to erase the past. I was just finally living a life that didn't have to make room for someone else's lies. I got a haircut, created a new email, reclaimed my name on every legal document. It felt empowering in the quietest way. I didn't broadcast my pain, but I didn't hide the truth either. One day, I shared a post. Just a quote. He left for someone else. I stayed for myself, and that was the best upgrade I ever made. I didn't tag him. Didn't need to. The story behind it was mine now. And to my surprise, it resonated. Women started reaching out. Strangers, old friends, even acquaintances I barely remembered. All of them saying, "Me too." Somehow, my heartbreak became a bridge, connecting me to people I never would have met otherwise. I started speaking at local groups, writing short posts about boundaries, self-worth, the quiet power of walking away. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to heal. But healing, it turns out, has a ripple effect. And while I was building something real out of the ruins, I didn't even realize I'd become someone others were looking to. I wasn't checking on Nathan. I had no curiosity left for him. But the universe has a way of circling back with receipts you never asked for. One morning, over coffee and emails, a message slid into my inbox. From her, the woman from the photo, no subject line, just a single sentence. "I think he's doing the same thing to me." And beneath it, a screenshot, a familiar scene. Nathan at dinner, this time with yet another woman, different restaurant, same smug smile, same hand-holding routine. I stared at it for a moment, not with rage or glee, just quiet recognition. Like watching a rerun of a show you've already cried over. I didn't reply. What was there to say? She hadn't stolen anything from me. He was never really hers to win. He was a man chasing new beginnings without ever closing the last chapter. A man addicted to the applause of attention, the thrill of secrecy. I knew exactly what she was feeling, and that's why I didn't respond. Because I knew I couldn't save her from learning the hard way. There was a time I would have written back, tried to warn her, maybe even offered sympathy, but I was no longer living in that version of myself. She was standing where I once stood, in the confusion, the disbelief, the ache of being replaced by someone who would eventually be replaced too. I closed the message, took a deep breath, and let it go. She'd find her own way through, just like I did. That message was the final proof I didn't need. The last confirmation that walking away wasn't just necessary, it was the best decision I ever made. I wasn't angry at him anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. Emotionally, spiritually, entirely. He was still playing the same game, still chasing validation in the arms of women who hadn't yet learned the cost. Meanwhile, I was waking up in a life that finally felt mine. These days, I move differently. I say no without guilt. I love slower but deeper. I trust, but with discernment. And I no longer shrink myself to fit into someone else's unfinished story. I show up for me now, in the big ways and the small. And every time I choose peace over drama, self-respect over nostalgia, I win. Quietly, fiercely, without needing to prove anything to anyone, especially him. He may have left for someone else, but I stayed for myself. And that, in the end, was the plot twist. The woman he thought he broke? She didn't just survive, she rose. And while he spirals in the same old patterns, I've already turned the page. No revenge, no regrets, just freedom. And that is a story he'll never be able to rewrite.